Drop the rope, Omega, or I will have you chained beside him." The command didn't roar. It sliced through the frozen courtyard like a blade drawn slowly across ice, deliberate, cold, final. Alpha King Apostolos stood at the edge of the snow-dusted training grounds, his heavy fur mantle brushing against polished steel pauldrons. The dying afternoon light caught the wolf insignia etched into his breastplate, casting predator shadows across pristine white snow. Behind him, carved wolf totems towered over fortress walls, their stone eyes judging everything. Winter tribunal banners snapped violently in the wind. He had come expecting treason. He had come expecting forbidden ritual, blood oaths, dark moon worship, perhaps even an attempt to raise a cursed bloodline. He did not expect this. Gianna, the castle's invisible, wolfless Omega, knelt in the snow, her rough spun gray tunic soaked through at the knees. Her hands gripped a leather rope suspended from a wooden training post, and dangling gently in the reinforced harness was a small gray pup, his hind legs hanging limp and useless. Leo, the son of the late Beta Commander Theron, a war hero's bloodline, a paralyzed disgrace. The snow beneath the pup was trampled with failed attempts, drag marks, collapsed prints, evidence of hours spent struggling. Gianna did not bow. She didn't even turn. Instead, she whispered softly to the pup, her breath misting in the frigid air. "Again, Leo, use your shoulders. Feel the ground. You are not broken." And then, impossibly, the pup growled. Not in submission, in defiance. Leo pushed forward with his front legs, dragging himself inches through the snow, his small body trembling with effort, his milky gray eyes, unseeing, unfocused, locked on nothing and everything at once. The watching guards laughed. Apostolos did not, because Leo didn't cower when the king stepped closer. The pup's lips curled back, exposing tiny fangs, and he snarled, protective, fierce, utterly unafraid. "He is not what you think," Gianna said quietly, finally turning to face him. Snowflakes clung to her dark braids. A faint scar traced her left cheek, old, deliberate, not from battle. Apostolos's jaw tightened. "No, he is exactly what I feared." Before we continue, please hit the subscribe and like button and tell me which city you're tuning in from. I love to know where this story found you. Now let's dive in. The Silva Ridgepack Fortress was less a home and more a monument to survival draped in cold grandeur. The great hall suffocated beneath the weight of its own history, vaulted ceilings carved with conquest records, braziers burning with eternal flame, the metallic tang of ambition thick enough to taste. Alpha King Apostolos sat upon the frostbone throne, a seat hewn from ancient glacial stone that seemed to leach warmth from anyone who touched it. He swirled dark wine in a crystal goblet, watching the winter tribunal gathering unfold beneath him. It was the night of the Doctrine Reaffirmation Ceremony, the annual ritual where the pack renewed its laws. Every high-ranking wolf in the territory postured and preened, hoping to catch the Alpha King's favor, to whisper the right counsel, to secure the right alliance. "You look like you're contemplating exile, Your Majesty," a voice purred from his right. Apostolos didn't turn. He knew the scent, sandalwood and cold iron. High Counselor Damaris, the kingdom's chief advisor, and the man the court had all but crowned as his second-in-command. "Exile would be too kind," Apostolos replied, his voice deep and empty. "I'm contemplating silence." Damaris chuckled, a sound like coins clinking. He rested a jeweled hand on the arm of the throne, his crimson robes vivid against black stone. "And leave us. The council wouldn't survive it. Besides, we're announcing the new pack purity protocols tonight. You need to look committed." Apostolos's eyes scanned the room, ignoring him. It was a habit born of war, scanning perimeters, checking exits, measuring threats. His gaze drifted past the dancing nobles, Past the tables laden with roasted venison and honeyed wine, to the shadows near the servants' entrance. There she was, Gianna. She wasn't wearing ceremony silks or borrowed finery. She wore the same gray, rough-spun tunic as always, her brown hair pulled back in a severe braid that had started to fray. She balanced a heavy tray of empty goblets, navigating the crowd with a grace that didn't belong to someone invisible. She was the wolfless Omega, the genetic anomaly, born to beta parents but unable to shift, unable to sense the pack link, unable to fulfill her destined role. A ghost in wolf's clothing. Most wolves treated her like furniture, useful when needed, forgotten immediately after. But Apostolos had always found her unsettling, not because she was weak, because she was too quiet. As he watched, a drunken warrior, Captain Gregor, usually disciplined but reckless when in his cups, stumbled backward, colliding hard with Gianna. The tray tipped, goblets clattered, and Gianna caught every single one before they hit the ground, her hands moving faster than any wolfless Omega should move, her balance perfect, her eyes never leaving the warrior's face. "Apologies," she murmured. Gregor barely heard her, but Apostolos did. And he saw something else too, the faintest flicker of a scar on her wrist. Old rope burns, the kind you get from holding something suspended for hours. His wineglass stilled mid-swirl. The pup. She'd been training the paralyzed pup in secret. For how long, and why? The winter tribunal convened at dawn. The council chamber was a cathedral of cold judgment, walls lined with ancestral wolf pelts, each one a reminder of strength preserved, his weakness purged. 12 high-backed chairs carved from ironwood circled a central dais where the accused would stand. Above them, suspended from iron chains, hung the doctrine tablet, ancient stone inscribed with laws older than memory. The law of the pure bloodline, the law of the strong survive, the law of the culled weak. Apostolos sat at the head of the circle, his fur mantle heavy across his shoulders. He hadn't slept. The image of Gianna's rope-burned wrists haunted him more than it should. High Counselor Damaris stood beside the doctrine tablet, his crimson robes immaculate, his silver hair pulled back in the traditional warrior's knot. He cleared his throat, and the murmuring council fell silent. "We gather under the winter moon to reaffirm what has kept us alive for generations," Damaris began. And his voice smooth as polished steel. "Strength, purity, survival." Heads nodded around the circle. "But there are whispers," Damaris continued, his gaze sweeping the room, "of defiance, of sentiment poisoning discipline, of a paralyzed pup being kept alive against all protocol." More nods, harder this time. Counselor Thalia, a silver-haired warrior with scars crossing her face like war paint, leaned forward. "The Beta Commander's son should have been culled at birth. Paralysis is not survivable in our world. Keeping him alive is cruelty disguised as kindness." "It's worse than cruelty," another counselor muttered. "It's weakness." Apostolos said nothing. He watched, listened, measured. Damaris raised a hand. "There is more. Reports indicate the wolfless Omega Gianna has been secretly training the pup, teaching him on techniques." He spat the word like poison. "Human methods, rehabilitation, as if we are livestock to be coddled." A collective hiss rippled through the chamber. "Bring her," Damaris ordered. The iron doors groaned open. Gianna entered flanked by 2 guards, but she didn't walk like a prisoner. Her spine was straight, her chin level, her hands loose at her sides. She wore the same gray tunic from the night before, still damp at the knees from kneeling in snow. She stopped at the center dais and looked directly at Apostolos, not at Damaris, at the king. "Gianna of no family name," Damaris intoned, circling her slowly like a predator testing prey. "You stand accused of defying the doctrine of strength. You have been training a paralyzed pup in forbidden methods. You have wasted resources, time, and hope on genetic failure. Gianna didn't flinch. Do you deny these charges? Damaris pressed. No, she said simply. Gasps echoed. Damaris smiled thinly. Then you admit to treason against pack law. I admit to keeping a pup alive, Gianna replied. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the chamber. If that is treason, then your laws are broken. The room erupted. Counselors shouted. Guards reached for weapons. Thalia slammed her fist on the table. Insolence! She mocks the ancestors. Silence! Apostolos spoke for the first time. The room froze. He rose slowly from his seat, his shadow stretching long across the stone floor. He descended the steps and stopped 3 paces from Gianna. You believe our doctrine is broken? He asked, his voice low, dangerous. Gianna met his gaze without trembling. I believe your doctrine measures the wrong kind of strength. Explain. She hesitated, not from fear, but from calculation. Then she spoke. Leo cannot run. He cannot hunt. By your laws, he is useless. She paused. But yesterday, he sensed movement beyond the western ridge before your scouts. He responds to vibration, reads pressure shifts in the ground, detects threats no wolf with 4 working legs could perceive. Apostolos's eyes narrowed. You think that's strength? Damaris scoffed. Parlor tricks, desperation. Gianna turned to him. Then test him. The challenge hung in the air like a blade. Damaris's smile faded. What? Put him in the field, Gianna said. Let him prove his worth. If he fails, call him yourself. Her voice hardened. But if he succeeds, then rewrite the doctrine. Another eruption. Counselors rose from their seats. Thalia called for immediate execution. Others demanded exile. Damaris looked to Apostolos, waiting for the killing blow. But the king was silent, because he remembered Leo's snarl. He remembered the pup's unseeing eyes locking onto him with absolute defiance. He remembered Gianna's composure under the weight of his command, and he remembered the rope burns, hours, days, months of training, not pity, strategy. The pup will be kept alive, Apostolos said finally. The chamber fell deathly quiet. Damaris's jaw tightened. Your Majesty, for observation, Apostolos continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. We will assess his capabilities. If he proves worthless, the doctrine stands. If not, he looked at Gianna. Then perhaps it's time we learn to see differently. Damaris bowed stiffly, but his eyes burned with something darker than disappointment. As the council dismissed, Apostolos watched Gianna escorted out. She glanced back once, not in gratitude, in warning. Apostolos rose before dawn. The fortress was still draped in darkness when he slipped through the eastern gate, his breath misting in the frigid air. No guards, no council, no witnesses, just the crunch of fresh snow beneath his boots and the distant howl of wind through the mountain pass. He knew where she would be. The training grounds were empty except for 2 figures, one kneeling, one suspended. Gianna worked in silence, her movements precise and practiced. Leo hung in the leather harness, his small body trembling as he pushed against the resistance. She had added weight stones to the rig, small pouches of sand tied to the frame. Apostolos crouched behind a supply cart, watching. Left shoulder, Gianna murmured. She tapped the ground twice with her boot. Leo shifted his weight instantly, compensating, redistributing balance through his upper body. Good. Again. Faster. 3 taps. Leo pivoted, his front legs moving independently, his core engaged despite the dead weight of his hind legs. This wasn't rehabilitation. This was combat conditioning. Apostolos's pulse quickened. Gianna lowered Leo from the harness and set him gently on the snow. The pup's legs dragged uselessly behind him, but he didn't whimper. He watched Gianna's feet with absolute focus. She stomped once. Leo barked, sharp, immediate. She stomped twice in quick succession. Leo dropped flat, belly to the snow, ears pinned back. "Pressure shift," she whispered. "Feel it, Leo, not just sound. Vibration." She knelt and pressed her palm flat against the frozen ground. Leo crawled forward, nose to the earth, his small body tense with concentration. Then he stopped, tilted his head, growled low. Gianna's eyes snapped toward the western ridge, a full 3 seconds before Leo barked again. Apostolos stood. The movement was involuntary, instinctive. He stepped from the shadows, snow falling from his cloak. Gianna spun, her hand moving protectively toward Leo. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Apostolos didn't acknowledge the greeting. His gaze was fixed on the pup. "How long have you been training him?" "Since he could hold his head up." "Why?" She hesitated. "Not from shame, from calculation." "Because no one else would." Apostolos crossed the courtyard slowly, deliberately. Leo growled again, that same fierce, protective sound, but Gianna placed a hand on his head. The pup fell silent. "You're not teaching him to survive," Apostolos said quietly. "You're teaching him to fight." Gianna met his gaze. "Yes." The admission hung between them like a drawn blade. "He cannot run," Apostolos continued, his voice low, dangerous. "He cannot chase. He cannot flee. No. So what use is he in battle?" Gianna's jaw tightened. She knelt beside Leo, her hand still resting on his head. "He doesn't need to run." Apostolos stepped closer. "Explain." She looked up at him, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. "Wolves rely on sight, scent, hearing." But Leo lost his hind legs. His body compensated, his other senses sharpened, not just hearing, but feeling, ground vibration, pressure shifts, tremor detection. "Tremor detection," Apostolos repeated slowly. "He can sense movement through snow, through stone, through frozen earth, approaching units, tunneling, weight distribution across terrain." She paused. "Things your scouts miss." Apostolos stared at her, then at Leo. The pup's milky eyes were unfocused, but his ears swiveled constantly, tracking sounds Apostolos couldn't hear. His nose twitched, reading the air. His small body remained tense, coiled, alert. "Show me," Apostolos commanded. Gianna hesitated, then nodded. She stood and walked 10 paces away, then stomped the ground in a complex rhythm. 3 quick taps, 1 long, 2 short. Leo's head snapped toward the western ridge. He barked once, paused, barked twice more in rapid succession. Gianna's face went pale. "What is it?" Apostolos demanded. "That's the warning pattern," she whispered. "Multiple units are moving fast." Apostolos turned toward the ridge. Nothing, no movement, no sound. The watchtower sentries stood relaxed, unaware. "He's mistaken," Apostolos said. "He's never been wrong." Leo barked again, louder, more insistent, and then the watchtower horn blew. The sound split the dawn like a knife through silk. 3 short blasts, the signal for incoming threat. A sentry shouted from the western wall. "Movement beyond the ridge, multiple hostiles approaching fast." Apostolos' blood turned to ice. The pup had sensed them minutes before trained scouts, through snow, through distance, through terrain that should have masked all approach. He turned slowly to Gianna. She stood beside Leo, her hand steady on the pup's head, her expression unreadable. "How long have you known he could do this?" Apostolos asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since the first winter." "And you said nothing." Her gaze hardened. "Would you have believed a wolfless Omega?" Apostolos had no answer, because she was right. He wouldn't have. The watchtower horn sounded again, longer, more urgent. Guards scrambled across the courtyard. Damaris emerged from the fortress, barking orders, his face twisted with alarm. But Apostolos didn't move. He stood in the snow, staring at the small grey pup who couldn't walk, the pup who had just saved his kingdom. "Get him inside," Apostolos said quietly, "and say nothing to the council." Gianna's eyes widened slightly. "Your Majesty, that's an order." She nodded once, then scooped Leo into her arms and disappeared into the shadows. Apostolos remained alone in the training grounds as chaos erupted around him. His doctrine said the weak must be culled, but what he'd just witnessed wasn't weakness. It was warfare. 3 years earlier, the border was burning. Smoke choked the night sky, turning the moon blood red. Screams echoed through the mountain pass, not the howls of wolves, but the raw animal terror of ambush, of betrayal. Gianna pressed herself against the frozen rock face, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. She had no wolf to call, no shift to save her, just human instincts and the knife she'd stolen from a dead rogue. She was 21 years old and had been a prisoner for 3 months. They'd found her living in the abandoned human settlement beyond the northern ridge, a wolfless anomaly surviving alone in territory no Omega should have reached. The patrol had assumed she was mad, feral, dangerous. Beta Commander Theron had been the one to spare her life. "She's wolfless, not witless," he'd said, blocking the executioner's blade. "Bring her to the fortress. Let the king decide." But the king never decided. She became invisible, a servant, a shadow, a genetic mistake filed away in the lowest quarters of the castle. Until tonight. The ambush had come without warning, a coordinated strike during the border negotiations with the eastern clans. 50 wolves slaughtered in the first 10 minutes. The air reeked of blood and burning fur. Gianna had been traveling with the supply caravan when the attack began. She'd run, not toward safety, but toward the sounds of fighting, driven by some instinct she didn't understand. That's when she saw him, Theron. The Beta Commander stood in a defensive circle with 5 other warriors, protecting a single figure at the center, Alpha King Apostolos, younger than, newly crowned, still learning to carry the weight of the Frostbone throne, and surrounded. "They came from inside," Theron roared, his sword slick with blood. "The eastern clans had our patrol routes, our supply schedules. Someone sold us out." Apostolos fought like a storm, brutal, efficient, unrelenting. But even he couldn't hold against 20 attackers. One by one, the defenders fell. Theron was the last standing. Gianna watched from the shadows as an arrow punched through his shoulder, then another through his thigh. He dropped to one knee but didn't fall. "Run, my king!" Theron shouted. "The tunnels beneath the western ridge. Go!" But Apostolos didn't run. He fought his way to Theron's side, dragged him upright. And together they carved a path through the ambush. Gianna moved without thinking. She slipped through the chaos, using her small size and wolfless scent to avoid detection. She found the tunnel entrance Theron had mentioned, a narrow crack in the rock face, hidden beneath fallen timber. "Here," she screamed. Apostolos's head snapped toward her. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Then he was moving, hauling Theron toward the tunnel, guards closing ranks behind them. They made it inside. Barely. The tunnel collapsed behind them, whether from enemy explosives or desperate sabotage, Gianna never knew. Theron died 3 hours later in the emergency field camp. Gianna knelt beside him, using techniques she'd learned during her years among humans: pressure points, wound packing, tourniquet application. Things wolves didn't bother with because their healing was supernatural, but Theron's wounds were too deep. Silver-tipped arrows, poison. Apostolos sat across from him, his armor dented and bloodied, his face carved from stone. "Who sold us out?" the king asked quietly. Theron coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Council, Damaris. I found maps, trade records." His breathing rattled. "He's been selling patrol routes to eastern clans for years." Apostolos' jaw clenched. "Why?" "Power. Always. Power." Theron's hand shot out, gripping the king's wrist with desperate strength. The tunnels, beneath the fortress, smuggling routes. He's been using them. Where? Old watchtower, hidden maps. Theron's gaze shifted to Gianna. The wolfless girl. She saved us. Trust her. Apostolos looked at Gianna as if seeing her for the first time. Theron's grip tightened. My mate. She's pregnant. If the child survives, if I don't. He coughed violently. Promise me you'll protect my bloodline. You have my word, Apostolos said. Theron's eyes closed. He died as dawn broke over the mountains. 2 weeks later, Theron's mate gave birth. The labor was brutal, complicated. She hemorrhaged and died within hours. The pup survived, but his hind legs didn't move, paralyzed. The council whispered it was a curse, punishment for Theron's failure to prevent the massacre. They demanded the pup be culled immediately. Apostolos had hesitated. That night, Gianna appeared in the king's private chambers, the first and only time she'd ever dared. You made a promise, she said simply. And Apostolos stared at her. The pup cannot survive. Let me try. Why? She met his gaze. Because Theron saved your life, and you saved mine. Something shifted in the king's expression. You know nothing about raising pups. I know about adaptation. She stepped forward. Humans survive without wolves, without packs, without supernatural healing. They learn differently. I can teach him. The council will never allow it. Then don't tell them. Apostolos studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Keep him alive, he said, but stay invisible. If the council discovers this, they won't. Present day. Apostolos stood in his private study, staring at the map spread across his desk. The watchtower horn had stopped. The threat repelled. False alarm, the scouts claimed. But Leo had known. A knock echoed. From enter. Gianna stepped inside, alone. Snow still clung to her hair. You wanted to speak with me, your majesty. Apostolos didn't turn. Theron mentioned tunnels beneath the fortress, smuggling routes. Gianna went very still. You were there the night he died, Apostolos continued. You heard everything. Silence. Did you find the maps? He asked quietly. Another pause. Then, yes. Apostolos finally turned. And? Gianna's expression was unreadable. The tunnels are real. They run beneath the entire western wall. Damaris has been using them for years. The king's blood turned to ice. For what? Smuggling, weapons, bribes. She hesitated. And something else. What? Her gaze hardened. Assassins. The room tilted. The attack today wasn't random, Gianna continued. Leo sensed them because they were coming from below. Through the tunnels, just like the night Theron died. Apostolos gripped the edge of his desk. How long have you known? 3 years. And you said nothing. Her voice turned sharp. Would you have believed a wolfless Omega accusing your high counselor of treason? Apostolos had no answer, because once again, she was right. Show me the maps, he said finally. Gianna nodded. Tonight. Midnight came wrapped in silence. The fortress slept beneath a blanket of fresh snow, watchfires burning low on the battlements. Guards patrolled in lazy rotations, their breath misting in the frozen air. The winter tribunal had adjourned. The council had retired. Even Damaris had withdrawn to his chambers. Everything was still, everything was wrong. Apostolos stood in the war room, in studying the stolen maps Gianna had retrieved from beneath the old watchtower. Tunnel networks sprawled across yellowed parchment like veins beneath skin. Dozens of passages, some centuries old, others recently excavated, all leading directly under the western wall. These haven't been used in decades, Apostolos murmured. That's what Damaris wanted you to believe, Gianna replied. She stood near the window, Leo cradled in her arms. The pup was restless, his small body tense. ears swiveling constantly. Apostolos looked up. "What's wrong with him?" "I don't know. He's been like this since sunset." Leo whined, low, urgent. Then he barked. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Gianna's face went white. "No." "What?" "That's the pattern. Multiple units, underground." The words had barely left her mouth when the floor trembled. Not violently, just enough, a vibration that rattled the wine goblets on the table, shook dust from the ceiling beams. Apostolos drew his sword. "Sound the alarm." The western wall exploded. Not the gate, the ground beneath it. Stone erupted upward in a geyser of dirt and snow. The watchtower tilted, groaned, and collapsed in a thunderous avalanche of rubble. Screams echoed, horns blared, and from the smoking crater, figures emerged, dozens of them, masked, armed, moving with military precision. Assassins. Apostolos hit the courtyard at a dead run, his blade already slick with blood. The first attacker lunged from the shadows. He died before his feet touched snow. The courtyard had become a war zone. Firelight from burning wreckage cast dancing shadows across white ground. Guards fought desperately, outnumbered and disoriented. The assassins moved like smoke, fast, coordinated, utterly silent. "Protect the king," Captain Gregor roared, rallying a defensive line. Too late. 3 assassins broke through, blades gleaming. They moved as one unit, flanking left and right, forcing Apostolos into the center of the courtyard, away from his guards, isolated. Apostolos spun, his sword singing through frozen air. Steel clashed, sparks flew. He fought like the warrior he'd been before the crown, brutal, efficient, remorseless. But they weren't trying to win. They were trying to position him. He realized it, a second too late. A 4th assassin emerged from beneath a collapsed storage hatch, a tunnel entrance hidden in plain sight. The blade was already in motion, angled upward toward Apostolos's exposed spine. A killing blow, inevitable. Then Leo barked. The sound cut through the chaos like a thunderclap, sharp, frantic, desperate. Apostolos twisted on pure instinct. The blade meant for his spine carved across his left shoulder instead, slicing through fur and armor, biting deep into muscle. Pain exploded white hot, but he was alive. He pivoted, grabbed the assassin's wrist, and drove his blade through the man's throat in one vicious motion. The body crumpled. Apostolos staggered, blood pouring down his arm, his vision swimming. "Your Majesty!" Gregor crashed into the fight, 2 guards at his back. But more assassins were emerging from the tunnels, too many. Then Gianna stepped into the firelight. She didn't carry a sword. She carried a broken section of watchtower chain, heavy iron links still attached to a stone anchor. An assassin charged her. She waited. At the last second, she dropped low, swung the chain in a wide arc, and caught the attacker's legs. He went down hard. She reversed the swing, brought the stone anchor down on his skull. He didn't get up. Another came. She used his momentum against him, sidestepped, hooked the chain around his throat, and pulled him off balance into the path of his own ally's blade. She wasn't fighting like a wolf. She was fighting like a human. Strategy over strength, leverage over power, survival over pride. "The tunnels!" she shouted. "Collapse them!" Apostolos understood immediately. "Gregor, torches, burn the support beams." Guards rushed to obey, hurling firebrands into the open tunnel entrances. Ancient timbers caught instantly, flames racing through the underground network. The remaining assassins realized their escape was cut off. They fought harder, desperately. Apostolos pressed forward despite his wound, his blade a blur of silver and red. Gianna moved beside him, not behind, protecting his exposed left side with calculated precision. Leo barked again, warning. The largest tunnel entrance, directly beneath the armory, began to collapse. "Fall back," Apostolos commanded. The guards retreated, the ground buckled, and the entire western courtyard caved inward, swallowing flame, bodies, and screaming assassins into the burning tunnels below. Silence fell, broken only by crackling fire and distant moans. Apostolos stood in the center of the devastation, his left arm hanging useless, blood staining the snow around him. Gregor approached, dragging a surviving assassin by the collar. The man's mask was torn, revealing a face Apostolos recognized. A fortress guard, one of his own. Talk, Apostolos said coldly. The guard spat blood. It's done. The council has already... What council decree? Apostolos stepped closer. Who gave the order? The guard smiled through broken teeth. You think this was about killing you? He laughed, a wet, rattling sound. This was about proving you're weak, that your laws are outdated, that keeping the paralyzed abomination alive has made you soft. Apostolos' blood ran cold. The vote happens at dawn, the guard continued. With or without you, the High Council will remove you for failure to uphold doctrine. He looked past Apostolos, at Gianna, at Leo. They die first, then you. Apostolos raised his blade. Wait, Gianna started. Too late. The guard's head rolled across the blood-soaked snow. Apostolos turned to face her, his expression carved from ice and fury. Damaris isn't just corrupt, he said quietly. He's staging a coup. Gianna held Leo tighter. The pup was silent now, exhausted, trembling. What do we do? She whispered. Apostolos looked toward the fortress, toward the council chambers where dawn would bring judgment. We rewrite the doctrine, he said, before they kill us for it. Dawn broke gray and bitter over the ravaged fortress. The western courtyard resembled a mass grave, collapsed tunnels, scorched earth, bodies half buried in snow and ash. Survivors worked in grim silence, pulling the dead from the rubble. Apostolos sat in the war room, his left shoulder wrapped in bloodied bandages. The pain was manageable. The fury was not. Before him, spread across the table, lay the evidence. Trade ledgers stolen from Damaris's private quarters. Encoded correspondence with Eastern clan leaders, payment records for weapons, information, assassination contracts, and the maps, decades of tunnel networks, supply routes, infiltration points, all signed with the High Counselor's seal. Gianna stood near the window, Leo sleeping fitfully in a basket at her feet. She hadn't left the king's side since the attack. Captain Gregor entered, his face haggard. Your Majesty, we've identified the dead assassins. And 12 were fortress guards, 5 were council attendants, 3 were Eastern clan mercenaries. He paused. All recruited within the past 2 years. While Damaris restructured the watch rotations, Apostolos said flatly, Yes, Your Majesty. Apostolos stared at the ledgers. The pattern was clear now, brutally, horrifyingly clear. Theron had discovered it 3 years ago. That's why he'd been at the border negotiations, not to negotiate, to investigate. He'd been tracking illegal weapons shipments, following the money, connecting the corruption back to its source, and Damaris had arranged the massacre to silence him. The Beta commander knew, Apostolos said quietly. He tried to tell me, the night he died. He did tell you, Gianna said softly. Apostolos looked up sharply. She stepped forward. You were there. You heard him mention Damaris, council corruption, the tunnels. I thought he was delirious, battle-fevered. No. Her voice was gentle but firm. You thought he was paranoid, because Damaris had spent years convincing you he was loyal, indispensable. The truth landed like a physical blow. Apostolos stood abruptly, his chair scraping stone. He moved to the window, staring out at the smoking ruins. Theron entrusted you with Leo, he said. Why? Gianna hesitated. Because he knew what Damaris would do. Leo was born paralyzed, the perfect excuse to eliminate Theron's bloodline entirely. A weak heir, a genetic failure. Council doctrine would demand his death. And you agreed to protect him. Yes. Knowing it could get you killed. Yes. Apostolos turned. Why risk everything for a pup you didn't know? For a bloodline that wasn't yours? Gianna met his gaze steadily. Because Theron saw me. Not as a wolfless mistake. Not as a servant. As a person. Her voice cracked slightly. He was the first wolf who ever did. Silence filled the chamber. Apostolos felt something shift in his chest. Sharp, uncomfortable, like a blade being withdrawn. You've known about the coup for 3 years, he said quietly. The tunnels, the corruption, the assassination plots. Yes. And you said nothing. Her jaw tightened. I tried. I sent anonymous reports to your chambers. I left evidence where you would find it. I even attempted to speak with you directly twice. I don't remember, because your attendants turned me away. Because wolfless Omegas don't have audiences with kings. Her voice hardened. And when I finally managed to reach Captain Gregor, he laughed, told me to stop wasting his time with conspiracy theories. Gregor shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. Apostolos's hands clenched into fists. You should have... What? Gianna stepped forward, her composure finally cracking. Screamed louder. Demanded you believe me? I had no rank, no wolf, no voice. You would not have believed a wolfless Omega. The words hung between them like an executioner's blade. Because she was right. 3 years ago, if Gianna had walked into this chamber and accused High Counselor Damaris of treason, Apostolos would have dismissed her, possibly punished her for slander. He had ruled with strength, but he had ruled blind. I failed Theron, Apostolos said quietly. I failed you, I failed Leo. Gianna's expression softened slightly. You didn't know. I should have known. His voice turned cold, self-loathing. I built a kingdom where only the strong are heard, where deviation from doctrine is treason, where weakness is culled without question. He looked at Leo, still sleeping peacefully. And in doing so, I made myself deaf to the truth. Before Gianna could respond, the war room doors burst open. Councillor Thalia strode in, flanked by 4 guards. Her face was stone. Alpha King Apostolos, she announced formally. By decree of the High Council, you are summoned to emergency tribunal. Apostolos didn't move. On what grounds? Gross dereliction of duty, failure to uphold pack doctrine, and willful endangerment of the Silver Ridge Pack through incompetent governance. Damaris drafted this decree. The High Council voted unanimously, after an assassination attempt orchestrated by Damaris himself. Thalia's expression didn't change. The tribunal convenes at midday. You will answer the charges. If found guilty, the council will vote to remove you from the throne. She turned on her heel and left. Silence crashed down. Gregor cursed under his breath. It's a trap. They're using last night's attack as proof of your weakness, are claiming the paralyzed pup distracted you from real threats. They're not wrong, Apostolos said bitterly. I was distracted. By corruption I should have seen years ago. What do we do? Gianna asked. Apostolos looked at the maps, the ledgers, the evidence of betrayal. Then he looked at Leo, the pup who had warned them, who had saved them. The living proof that strength came in forms the doctrine had never imagined. We go to tribunal, Apostolos said quietly, and we give them a choice. What choice? He picked up the stack of evidence, his wounded shoulder screaming in protest. Evolve, he said, or burn. By noon, the entire fortress knew the Alpha King would stand trial, and the future of the Silver Ridge Pack hung in the balance. The great hall had been transformed into an execution chamber. Every high-ranking wolf in the territory packed the stone benches. Nobles, warriors, merchants, clan representatives. The air vibrated with anticipation, thick with the scent of blood yet to be spilled. This wasn't a tribunal, it was a public spectacle. At the center of the hall, a raised platform had been erected. Upon it sat the 12 council members, arranged in judgment. High Counselor Damaris occupied the central seat, his crimson robes immaculate, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. He looked like a king. Apostolos entered through the western doors, his wounded shoulder visible beneath his ceremonial armor. He wore no crown, no fur mantle, just steel and determination. Behind him walked Gianna, carrying Leo in her arms. The crowd erupted in whispers. The king brings the abomination to his own trial. Madness, already accepted defeat. Apostolos ignored them. He climbed the platform steps and stood before the council, his gaze locked on Damaris. "You summoned me," Apostolos said. "Here I am." Damaris smiled benevolently. "Alpha King Apostolos, you stand accused of dereliction of duty, violation of sacred doctrine, and endangerment of the Silver Ridge Pack through incompetent governance." He gestured to the assembled crowd. "The evidence speaks for itself. Under your watch, our fortress was breached, our warriors slaughtered, our western wall reduced to rubble." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. "And the cause?" Damaris continued, his voice rising. "Distraction, sentiment, the dangerous delusion that our ancient laws can be negotiated." He pointed at Leo. "You kept that creature alive in defiance of doctrine. You allowed a wolfless Omega to poison your judgment, and last night we paid the price in blood." The crowd roared approval. Apostolos remained silent. Damaris stood, spreading his arms wide. "The High Council has voted. You are unfit to rule. Step down peacefully, and you will be allowed to live in exile." His eyes glittered. "Refuse, and we will remove you by force." "And the pup?" Apostolos asked quietly. Damaris's smile widened. "The abomination will be executed, publicly, today, as a symbol that the Silver Ridge Pack has returned to purity and strength." Gianna's arms tightened around Leo. The pup sensed the danger. He growled, small, fierce, defiant. "You won't touch him," Apostolos said. "We already have the votes," Damaris replied. 11 council members stand with me. Only Councillor Thalia abstained. He leaned forward. "You've lost, Apostolos. Accept it with dignity." Apostolos finally smiled. It was not a kind expression. "Before you vote," he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "I have evidence to present." Damaris's smile faltered. "The tribunal has concluded. Evidence of treason." The word detonated like thunder. Apostolos pulled the stolen ledgers from his coat and threw them onto the council table. Pages scattered, maps unfurled, encoded letters spilled across polished wood. 3 years ago, Beta Commander Theron discovered that High Counselor Damaris was selling pack secrets to Eastern clans, weapons, patrol routes, tunnel maps. Apostolos' voice turned to ice. Theron died trying to expose this corruption, and last night, assassins funded by Damaris tried to finish what the border massacre started. Chaos erupted. Council members grabbed for the documents. Nobles shouted. Warriors reached for weapons. Damaris shot to his feet. Lies! Fabrications planted by the wolfless whore. "Guards," Apostolos commanded. "Arrest him." No one moved. Captain Gregor stood at the hall entrance, his hand on his sword hilt. But behind him, 20 fortress guards blocked the doorway. Damaris's guards. "You see?" Damaris said smoothly. "You command nothing. You are already deposed." He gestured, and 6 armed guards moved toward the platform. "Seize the king. Execute the pup." Gianna backed toward the edge of the platform, clutching Leo. Apostolos stepped between them and the advancing guards. "Stand down," he ordered. The guards hesitated. One of them, a young warrior named Marcus, looked torn. "Your Majesty, the High Council has voted." "The High Council is corrupted," Apostolos said. "Look at the evidence. Think for yourselves." "Evidence can be forged," Damaris interjected. "But doctrine is eternal. The law demands the weak be culled. Will you follow a king who defies the very foundation of our pack?" The guards advanced. Apostolos drew his sword with his good arm. "Last warning," he said quietly. Behind him, Gianna set Leo down gently. She picked up a ceremonial spear from the platform display. "If you die," she whispered, "I'm taking Leo and running. You won't have to." Apostolos didn't take his eyes off the guards. "I should have said this 3 years ago." His voice softened. "I saw your strength from the beginning, your resilience, your refusal to disappear even when everyone demanded it." He paused. "I was afraid of what that meant, afraid that acknowledging you meant admitting I was wrong about everything." Gianna's breath caught. "But you were never invisible to me," Apostolos continued. "You were just braver than I was." The first guard lunged. Apostolos deflected the blade despite his wounded shoulder, reversed the momentum, and disarmed the man in 3 moves. 2 more attacked. Gianna moved like water, quick, precise, using the spear's length to keep distance, targeting joints and balance points rather than attempting fatal strikes. Leo barked frantically, warning. More guards were coming from the side entrance. Apostolos realized they were surrounded. Damaris smiled from his seat. "Surrender, and I'll make the executions quick." Apostolos straightened, his sword still raised. "No. Then you'll die a traitor. Better a traitor to corruption than a servant to it." Apostolos turned to face the assembled crowd. His voice rang through the great hall like a war horn. "The High Council claims I've failed you. Perhaps they're right. I built a kingdom where only one kind of strength mattered, where deviation meant death, where the vulnerable were discarded without question." He gestured to Leo. "That pup saved my life last night. He warned us of the attack before trained scouts. He detected enemies through stone and snow, using senses we never valued because they didn't fit our doctrine." Murmurs spread. "And this woman," he indicated Gianna, "spent 3 years trying to warn me of treason. But I couldn't hear her because she had no rank, no wolf, no voice we considered worth listening to." His gaze swept the crowd. "So yes, I failed you, but not by being weak." His voice dropped, deadly quiet. "By being blind." He turned back to Damaris. "You want my throne? Then fight me for it." Apostolos raised his sword. Trial by combat, ancient law, unchallengeable. The hall fell deathly silent. Damaris's expression twisted. "You're wounded, half dead already. Then it should be easy." Damaris looked at the guards, at the council, at the crowd. He was trapped, refuse, and he looked like a coward. Accept, and he risked everything. Slowly, Damaris smiled. "Very well." He descended from the council platform. "When you fall, the pup dies screaming." Apostolos met his gaze. "When you fall, your corruption dies with you." They moved the trial by combat to the outer courtyard. The entire fortress assembled under a gray winter sky, thousands of wolves forming a living arena around a cleared circle of blood-stained snow. Ancient tradition demanded witnesses. This would be binding, irreversible. Apostolos stood at one end of the circle, his wounded shoulder screaming beneath fresh bandages. He'd refused healing herbs, refused numbing poultices. Pain kept him sharp. Damaris stood opposite, pristine in ceremonial armor that had never seen real battle. But he was younger, uninjured, and fought with the cold precision of someone who'd arranged dozens of assassinations. He didn't need to be honorable, he just needed to win. Between them, placed at the circle's center, sat Leo in his leather harness. "The prize," Damaris had declared. When I win, I execute him myself. Gianna stood at the circle's edge, her face pale but composed. She held nothing, no weapons, no leverage. If Apostolos fell, she'd have seconds to run before Damaris's guards seized her. She'd already lost everything once. She'd learned to run fast. The presiding elder raised a ceremonial horn. By ancient law and pack tradition, this combat will determine truth. The victor's cause is righteous. The fallen's cause dies with him. He blew 3 sharp blasts. The fight began. Damaris moved like a viper, fast, efficient, targeting the wounded shoulder immediately. Apostolos barely deflected the first strike. The impact sent lightning through his injured arm. He gritted his teeth, pivoted, and countered with a low slash that Damaris easily avoided. The crowd murmured. The king was slow, wounded, struggling. Damaris smiled. You should have accepted exile. He attacked again. A flurry of calculated strikes designed to exhaust, to injure, to humiliate. Apostolos gave ground, his boots sliding through snow. He's losing. The king is finished. Damaris will restore order. Gianna's hands clenched into fists. Leo whined, his small body trembling. Then Damaris made his mistake. He gloated. When this is over, he said, circling, I'll make the Omega watch. I'll make her hold the pup while I... Apostolos lunged, not with strategy, with fury. His blade crashed against Damaris's guard with enough force to drive the counselor back 3 steps. Another strike, another, the wounded shoulder forgotten, replaced by something primal and absolute. Damaris's smile vanished. He fought back desperately now, his pristine armor dented, his breathing ragged. You want to know why Theron trusted her? Apostolos snarled, our driving forward. Because she sees what cowards like you refuse to. That strength isn't perfection. He knocked Damaris's sword wide. It's adaptation. His blade stopped an inch from Damaris's throat. The crowd went silent. Apostolos could end it. Right now, one thrust, justice delivered. But Leo barked. Not the warning bark. Something worse. Frantic, desperate, terrified. Apostolos' head snapped toward the pup. Leo was thrashing in his harness, his small body convulsing, his unseeing eyes wild. What's wrong with him? Someone shouted. Gianna ran forward. She pressed her hands to the snow, feeling for vibrations. Her face went white. Everyone move, she screamed. Get away from the courtyard. It's a trick, Damaris started. The ground trembled, not gently, violently. Apostolos felt it through his boots. A massive pressure wave building beneath the stone, something catastrophic, something that didn't belong. The tunnels, he breathed. Gianna grabbed Leo. They packed the collapsed tunnels with explosives. They're going to... The western section of courtyard erupted. Stone and snow geysered skyward in a column of fire and debris. Wolves screamed, scattering in every direction. The blast wave knocked dozens off their feet. And beneath the smoke, the tunnel network revealed itself. A vast honeycomb of passages, some centuries old, others recent, all interconnected, all rigged to explode. Apostolos realized the horrifying truth immediately. This wasn't about winning the trial by combat. It was about eliminating everyone who'd seen the evidence. Second charge, Gianna shouted, pointing to the eastern wall. Another explosion, then a third near the main gate. Chaos consumed the fortress. Wolves fled in every direction, trampling each other, desperate to escape the collapsing ground. Apostolos grabbed Damaris by the throat and dragged him toward the center platform where the crowd could see. You did this, Apostolos roared. Damaris thrashed. It was supposed to be controlled. Blame it on structural weakness, on your negligence. You were going to murder the entire assembly. I was going to rebuild, Damaris snarled. Without you, without the old laws choking us. Apostolos hurled him to the ground. The remaining council members, those who'd survived the initial blasts, stood in shocked horror. "He planned this," Apostolos said, his voice carrying across the panicked crowd. "The assassination attempt. The explosives. All of it designed to eliminate anyone who might challenge his coup." Captain Gregor emerged from the smoke, dragging a prisoner, one of the fortress engineers. "He's confessing," Gregor shouted. "Damaris paid him to rig the tunnels, said it was for structural testing." The engineer collapsed, sobbing. "I didn't know it was meant to kill people. I thought—" Another explosion, smaller this time, near the servant quarters. Leo barked again, warning, counting. Gianna listened to the pattern. 3 more charges, southern wall, armory, and— her eyes widened. "The Great Hall, where the archives are stored." "He's destroying evidence," Apostolos said. "Arrest them." Thalia's voice cut through the chaos. The sole abstaining counselor pointed at Damaris and his loyalists. "Arrest them all." Loyal guards surged forward, seizing council members who tried to flee. Damaris stood alone now, his pristine armor scorched, his carefully constructed coup collapsing around him. "It doesn't matter," he said, almost laughing. "You've already lost. The doctrine is broken. The pack is scattered. You've proven me right. Sentiment and weakness have destroyed us." Apostolos stepped forward. "No." He turned to face the assembled crowd, thousands of wolves, frightened and confused, watching their world burn. "You want to know what destroyed us?" Apostolos' voice rang across the courtyard. "Blind tradition. The refusal to see strength in anything that doesn't match our ancient expectations." He gestured to the smoking ruins. "We built these tunnels centuries ago for supply and defense, but we forgot they existed. We stopped maintaining them, stopped watching them, because they didn't fit our image of how a fortress should work." He looked at Leo, still cradled in Gianna's arms. "That pup warned us. 3 times now, he's detected threats every trained scout missed, not because he's perfect, because he's adapted." Apostolos' gaze swept the crowd. "Strength is not speed. It is not perfection. It is not the ability to crush enemies with your bare hands." His voice dropped, powerful and absolute. "Strength is survival." He placed a hand on Leo's head. "This pup survived paralysis. He survived being marked for death. He survived because someone refused to accept that weakness and usefulness are the same thing." He looked at Gianna. "And she survived being invisible, being dismissed, being silenced. Yet she kept fighting, kept warning us, kept protecting the future even when we couldn't see it." Silence fell across the courtyard. "From this day forward," Apostolos declared, "no wolf will be cast aside for deviation from tradition. No voice will be ignored because it lacks rank. And no pup," his hand tightened gently on Leo's head, "will be culled for being different." He turned to the surviving council members. "The doctrine is broken, not because it was wrong about strength." His voice turned cold. "But because it made us blind to it." Damaris lunged, a desperate final attack, a hidden blade drawn from his boot. Leo barked. Apostolos turned, caught the blade with his bare hand, and drove his sword through Damaris's chest. The High Counselor fell into the blood-stained snow, and the old law died with him. Spring came early to Silver Ridge. The snow that had buried the fortress for months began its slow retreat, revealing patches of dark earth and the first brave shoots of green. Icicles dripped from the repaired watchtowers. The air, once sharp enough to cut, softened into something almost gentle. The fortress had changed, not just the rebuilt walls or the sealed tunnels, but something deeper. Something in the way wolves moved through the courtyards, the way they spoke to one another, the way they listened. Leo had become a legend, the paralyzed pup who'd saved the kingdom. Every morning, He held court in the eastern training grounds, no longer hidden in shadows, but displayed proudly at the center of fortress life. A dozen young wolves surrounded him, some injured, some born different, all learning the techniques Gianna had spent years perfecting: balance training, unsensory development, adaptive combat. A young she-wolf with a twisted front leg practiced weight distribution exercises. A male pup born deaf learned to read ground vibrations through his paws. An older warrior, blinded in battle, relearned the world through scent maps and echolocation. Leo supervised them all, his small body stronger now, his harness modified with wheels that let him move independently. He couldn't run, he'd never hunt, but he'd become something more valuable. A teacher, a symbol, a living rejection of the old doctrine. And beside him always stood Gianna. She wore new clothes now, not servant's gray, but the deep blue of the king's personal guard, embroidered with the wolf insignia. Her title, freshly created, was inscribed on the training ground archway: Head of Rehabilitation and Tactical Sensory Division. The council had protested, of course, until Apostolos reminded them there was no council. Not the old one, anyway. Damaris's co-conspirators had been exiled or executed, the remaining loyalists stripped of rank and privilege. In their place, Apostolos had appointed wolves who'd proven themselves through service, not bloodline. Healers, scouts, engineers. Even Captain Gregor, who'd admitted his failure to listen to Gianna years ago and requested demotion as penance, Apostolos had promoted him instead. "We need people who can admit their mistakes," the king had said, "not people who've never made any." The doctrine had been rewritten on new stone tablets, the old ones shattered publicly in the Great Hall. Strength is survival. Adaptation is evolution. Every wolf has value. Simple, revolutionary, terrifying to those who'd built their power on the old ways, but the kingdom was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing. Apostolos stood on the high balcony overlooking the valley, watching the sunset over mountains still capped with snow. His shoulder had healed, leaving a scar that ached in cold weather, a permanent reminder of the night everything changed. Footsteps approached. He didn't turn. "They're asking when you'll choose a mate," Gianna said, joining him at the rail. "The nobles are getting impatient." "Let them be impatient." She smiled faintly. "You're the Alpha King. You need an heir. Tradition demands." "Tradition nearly destroyed us." Silence settled between them, comfortable and charged in equal measure. Below, Leo led his students through evening exercises. Even from this distance, his bark was clear, sharp, commanding, absolutely certain. "He's thriving," Apostolos observed. "He always was," Gianna replied. "You just couldn't see it." Apostolos turned to look at her. The setting sun caught the scar on her cheek, the one he'd noticed that first day in the courtyard. He'd never asked about it. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. Gianna touched it reflexively. "A human village. When they discovered I was different, they thought I was cursed." She smiled without humor. "Turns out wolves and humans aren't so different. Both fear what they don't understand." "I feared you," Apostolos admitted. Her eyebrows rose. "Me? Not your weakness, your strength." He looked back at the valley. "You survived alone in human territory for years. You learned things no wolf knows. You saw corruption I was blind to. You protected a pup against an entire kingdom's doctrine." He paused. "You were never wolfless, Gianna. You were something else entirely." Her breath caught. "Something I didn't have words for," he continued. "Something that terrified me, because it meant everything I'd built my reign on was incomplete." Gianna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "You were never blind either." He looked at her sharply. "You just didn't look," she continued. "There's a difference. Blindness is permanent. Not looking is a choice. She met his gaze. You chose to see. That takes more courage than most wolves will ever possess. Apostolos felt something shift in his chest, the final piece of armor falling away. The nobles want me to choose a mate, he said carefully. I know. Someone strong, someone worthy of the throne. I know. Someone who can lead beside me, who sees what I miss, who'll fight me when I'm wrong and stand with me when I'm right. Gianna's hands tightened on the balcony rail. Apostolos stepped closer. I'm looking at her. The words hung in the spring air between them. Gianna's eyes widened. I'm wolfless. I have no rank, no bloodline. The nobles will. Let them protest, Apostolos said. I've spent my entire reign listening to tradition. Maybe it's time I listen to something else. And what's that? He reached out, gently touching the scar on her cheek. The truth. Below them, Leo barked triumphantly. One of his students, the she-wolf with the twisted leg, had successfully completed a balance drill. The other pups howled in celebration. The sound echoed across the valley, joyful and fierce. Gianna smiled, tears shining in her eyes. He's going to change everything, she whispered. He already has. Apostolos took her hand. Together, they watched the sunset over a kingdom learning to see differently. The snow continued its retreat. Young wolves trained in ways their ancestors never imagined. And in the distance, merchants from the eastern clans arrived bearing trade goods and peace offerings. Word had spread. Silver Ridge had broken its doctrine and survived. No, thrived. The future arrived on wheels and adaptation, carried by a paralyzed pup and a wolfless Omega who refused to be invisible, and the Alpha King who'd finally learned to look. The Alpha King caught a wolfless Omega defying his law, but what he found instead was the future of his kingdom. If you enjoyed this story of strength redefined and love discovered in unexpected places, let me know in the comments. Your support decides what tale the moon whispers next.